just because a professionally trained and certified pilot can fly propeller aircraft, does that mean that he or she can also fly a jet aircraft, a rotorcraft, a Dreamlifter, MD-83 aircraft, or even a strato-launch rock?
So no, and yes. So how it generally works when you're trying to get a pilot, and this is, I love your question, because this provides this knowledge and to be able to guide people so they're able to make the right decisions for themselves. So in response to your question, how it works is you would go off the flight school, you would become a commercial pilot, and you'd conduct what is called initial training, right? So you would get your private pilot's license, your commercial pilot's license, your instrument rating, your multi-engine. These are all just ratings and qualifications that will enable you to become a commercial pilot, to be able to fly for an airline or private jet operator. But that is only, in essence, the initial. That's why we call it initial training. After that, you can't just say, I'm a commercial pilot. Today I'm going to fly Boeing 737. Tomorrow I'm going to fly Airbus A380. It doesn't really work like that, because all the aircrafts are completely different. They have different performance characteristics. They have different aircraft systems, different weights and limitations, and all of these things. So you would have to engage in what's referred to as type rating training. And that is a training where you would basically undergo it in a simulator. It usually tends to vary between 1 month to 2 months. You would basically go off for this training, and you would be trained how to fly a specific type of aircraft. That's why it's called type training. It's a specific type, whether that's a Boeing 737. And they would basically train you all about all the systems, all the limitations. You learn how to fly the aircraft in the simulator. You would learn how to handle all the emergencies, all the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, and the EOPs, the emergency operating procedures. And at the end of your training, you are now qualified to fly that specific type of aircraft. And so therefore, you can apply for jobs which would be able to which fly that particular type of aircraft. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. So, but then, are people actually trained to fly all kinds of aircraft, or some specifics? Just as you have for medicine, you can either be a general practitioner or a specialist.
Okay, so very good question. When it comes to getting a job in aviation, people usually tend to use the word commercial pilot, and the word commercial pilot, it's now been used in the sense of being an airline pilot. So the two words, pretty much now synonymous, but they're actually, they don't mean the same thing.
Roy Rudolph Romer is an American politician, and he once said, "Let's take flight simulation as an example. If you're trying to train a pilot, you can simulate almost the whole course. You don't have to get in an airplane until late in the process." All right. So our next one is from Denzel Hayes Washington Jr. He is an American actor and filmmaker. He once said, "If you don't trust the pilot, don't go." Ooh. All right then. Our next quote is from Hillary Clinton. She is an American politician, diplomat, lawyer, writer, and public speaker who served as the 67th United States Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013. She once said, "Take criticism seriously, but not personally. If there is truth or merit in the criticism, try to learn from it. Otherwise, let it roll right off you." Absolutely spot on. Our next one is from Abraham Maslow, an American psychologist who was best known for creating Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He once said, "One can choose to go back towards safety or forward towards growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again." I like that one. All right. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. I'm sure you're wondering where exactly all of that quotes is headed towards. Zino Mario-Ghae is an experienced British-Nigerian commercial pilot who holds an airplane, helicopter, and unmanned aerial vehicle, that's UAV licenses with several thousand flight hours. As a holder of ESA, FAA, and NCAA licenses, Mario-Ghae has conducted flight training across the world and is highly conversant in in-flight training affairs. Zino Aviation is based in Nigeria, the United Kingdom, as well as the United States of America, and is partnered with several reputable flight schools worldwide. Captain Zino joins us virtually via Skype after this timeout. You don't want to miss this part of the show? Join us again. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now let's get down to business. Our guest on the show today is Captain Zino Mario-Ghae. He is British-Nigerian commercial pilot. It is great to have you on the show today, sir.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. All right, now let's start by breaking the ice. Now, when anyone hears captain before seeing the person, like physically, the first thing that comes to mind is he's probably an old person. He's definitely not below his 30s or 40s. So first, like I said, breaking the ice, how old are you and how long have you been practicing, or still practicing?
Okay, so I'm soon about to be 29, so I'm actually 28. I have been flying for near a decade. I was Nigeria's youngest pilot when I started flying at the age of 18. I was a licensed pilot. I was a commercial pilot at the age of 19, and I've been flying for close to a decade.
Also, I learned that you actually started quite early. So how's it been for you?
Yeah, it's been good. You know, I'm a big advocate of people starting early. I come from an aviation family. So my dad's a pilot. My late uncle was a pilot. My brother's also a pilot. I've got a cousin that's got a pilot's license. So aviation's been pretty much in my blood. I actually started flying early on from the age of 12 years of age. We used to own a Piper Warrior, which is a small training aircraft. So my dad would take us up, you know, and we'd fly. So I've been you know, involved in aviation for quite some time. So the moment I finished my my secondary school education, I went straight off to become a commercial pilot. Like I said, I was a licensed pilot at 18 and a commercial pilot at 19, and yeah, it's been really good for me.
So from 12, and then you retired early. How's it possible?
It's very possible. You know, I think everybody has what their interests are. There's some people like my father, for example. He's still flying. He's been flying for a good 30 years, over 30 years actually. But for somebody like me, I love aviation. Aviation is a humongous a passion of mine. But like I said, I've been flying for close to a decade, and I'm somebody that I love teaching. I love training. I have a few businesses which I run, including my company Zino Aviation, where we actually teach people how to become commercial pilots. And for me, that was a really big interest of mine. And so I've achieved everything I set out to achieve in aviation. And so now I'm branching off into the business side of commercial aviation now.
Now, since you talked about the business side of aviation, has it been operating in Nigeria's aviation sector, doing it as a business? Has it been all rosy, like a walk in the park, or you just have to roll up your sleeves and just get right into it? Because especially with regards to accessing FX, that's foreign exchange, maintenance regulations, tax, and the fact that we hear so much about how investors' appetite keeps waning off, especially foreign investors and the airlines. What can you actually tell us in that regard, in terms of the challenges that you face running your aviation business?
Okay, so just to explain what my aviation business is, I run a company called Zino Aviation, and we are a pilot training, aviation management, and a consultancy firm. We're based in Victoria Island in Lagos, as well as United Kingdom. And what we pretty much do is we help aspiring pilots and organizations who are seeking to train pilots to become commercial pilots. So that includes, doing things such as pilot mentorship, running master classes, doing, pilot training and logistics management services for governments, parastatals, airlines who are seeking to train pilots. And we also have partner flight schools who are based all across the world, from South Africa, America, Europe, and beyond. So in a nutshell, we help aspiring pilots to finally fulfill their dreams to become pilots. So as you said, operating in Nigeria, there are quite a lot of challenges. As you mentioned, there is the forex challenge. So as the currency, unfortunately, has lost a lot of its value, a lot of commercial pilots are unable to go abroad to conduct their flight training. It's become significantly more expensive. There are people who we spoke to years ago who they had the money, maybe they're waiting for some reason or another to go off to become pilots, but now the value of that money in essence is halved. So there is that issue. Which a lot of people, they do struggle to get around. There are quite a few other issues as well, such as not access to financing. So when we're looking at the pilot training sector becoming pilots, in other parts of the world, such as America, the United Kingdom, and the West, they have access to bank loans. So the vast majority of people who become commercial pilots, they become commercial pilots because they go and they get a loan from the bank, and they've got years and years, to repay the loan back. The interest rates on the loans are very, minuscule as well. Maybe you're looking at maybe 5%, 6%. But unfortunately, here in Nigeria, unless you have quite a substantial amount of money, maybe you're from an affluent home, as we mentioned earlier, that even the middle class, they're struggling now to also train pilots. So what access to financing do they have? And it becomes very problematic because even if you try to get a bank loan, it's very, very difficult at the moment in Nigeria. So these are some of the problems which we are trying to tackle as a company. We're in talks with banks, we're in talks with governments, parastatals, to be able to provide the financing so that really competent professional, or rather competent people can become professional pilots with the right financing that they can provide.
So aside talking to the banks, I hear you say that if you have to come into this business, then you have to have huge amount of money. So do you personally have a huge amount of money that you came into the business with?
So the thing with, like I said, with our company, Zino Aviation, we're primarily a consultancy company. So we're a pilot training, aviation management, and consultancy. And fortunately, one of the good things about doing consultancy is it's a service-based business. So we're not required to have, a humongous amount of capital to do what we do. Consultancy services, mentorship, and other services to governments and so on. However, for the individuals who are trying to become pilots, who are the individuals who we're servicing and we're serving, you do need quite a lot of money to become a commercial pilot. Depending on where you do your training, the cost varies significantly. It could cost you anywhere between $35,000 US all the way to $110,000 US, all to become a commercial pilot, and that is a substantial amount of money that a lot of people in Nigeria unfortunately do not have access to, and that's why as a company, Zino Aviation, my company, we are trying our best to work with these governments and to work with these banks to be able to make it accessible for the average person.
Also, I hear that, like for a lot of people, they will say that the more you're in the game, the more sought after you get. So for you, like especially with security officials, they'll tell you that if he's been there over time, then he means that he is the general and all. So it doesn't actually work for the aviation sector, because I know that you retired earlier.
Well, what I would say is, as mentioned, because I retired early, I've actually still been flying for a decade. So a lot of people, they look at me and they, look at my youth, so to speak, and they think, oh, wow, but the fact is, I've been flying since I was 12. I've been a licensed pilot since I was 18. And, it's not necessarily about how long you've also been doing something. It's about, okay, how exposed have you been to different elements? So, for example, what we do at Zino Aviation, globally, we are the only people doing what we do. There's another company in Europe who does something similar, but when you look at what we do comprehensively in terms of all our services, in terms of the expertise that we provide, we're the only ones that are doing this. And we are not just in a niche market. It's what I refer to as a hyper niche market. And it's really, really specific, and predominantly we're targeting aspiring pilots. Even how I founded my company, Zino Aviation, it had to do with the fact that I went off the flight school, and it's well known across the world that a lot of flight schools, because there's a significant amount of money involved, they tend to rip people off, they tend to lie to people, take advantage of people, and a lot of aspiring pilots, because they don't have access to knowledge, they don't have anybody that's gone ahead of them. They make a lot of all these mistakes, and they fall into these set traps. So when I was becoming a commercial pilot, because I've also done I fly planes, I fly helicopters, I've also got a drones license. So I've been to over 7 flight schools in total across my career when I was becoming a pilot. I've been able to access so much information. I've been able to gain a wealth of knowledge from all the various different experiences, all the failures, all the errors, all the times I lost money, all the times I was deceived. And so I said to myself, I do not want other aspiring pilots to have to go through the exact same problems and make the same mistakes which I made. So as time has gone on, I've been able to develop the skill set, collaborate as much information as possible to now be able to help aspiring pilots. So it's not necessarily the length of time you've been doing something. It's okay, what is your particular market, which is pilot training very specifically, and it's now to share those expertise with other people.
Awesome. Now, so with all that you've said, I actually recall that a particular pilot I talked to, and then he said he had an experience, very bad experience with some of his passengers when they talked to him rudely, and then he got angry, he broke down and vehemently refused to fly that airline, damning every consequence. So for you, what has been your most memorable experience?
Is that with passengers or with or just in general?
Just general, either with passengers or flying, whenever you're airborne.
Okay, so I would say that I've had many memorable experiences. I would say at one time, or I used to. So I talk about when I flew planes. So when I was doing my pilot training, for example, my most memorable experience was going solo. So obviously, when you start flying, you don't know how to fly. When you're in flight school, so your instructor is going to be teaching you. And after some time, obviously it depends on your ability. People who are really good, they can go solo, which is, the instructor will step out of the aircraft and say, hey, the aircraft is yours. Go fly by yourself. And then that's called flying solo. So if you're really good, you can go solo a lot earlier. If you're not so good, people who struggle, it takes them a lot more hours to go solo. So I would say when I was flying a fixed wing, that was probably my most memorable, because I remember, the instructor stepping out, saying it's all yours. And I remember, taxiing to take off. I put power, and I was like, wow, like I'm all here by myself. And I was able to fly all by myself. I was even shouting all the way around, just ecstatic. Really? And so that was my most memorable experience flying planes. I flew commercial helicopters in Nigeria for about 6-7 years. And my most memorable wasn't such a positive thing. Was a bad weather experience where we landed on an offshore oil rig, and passengers got off, but the weather was really, really bad. So when we took off, the weather had basically circled us, and so there was no sun, couldn't see anything. The sky was totally black. There was lightning everywhere, and so we had to go. And so it wasn't the most smooth ride, let's put it that way. But it was very interesting, and I'm here today. So it ended well. So it's good.
So has the weather, the climate change that you've faced, are there any other mechanical issue that you've had to deal with, and how were you able to deal?
In my career of about a decade, I'm one of the really fortunate ones. One thing I tell people is, when it comes to aviation, people have to realize that aviation is the most regulated industry in the world. It's extremely safe. A lot of people, they tend to panic because they think that they're going to have emergencies or they're going to crash or everything. But the likelihood of you being in a commercial air accident is about 1 in 16 million. If you're on the 3rd Mainland Bridge, for example, here in Lagos, the amount of people that will maybe crash into you to end your life is significantly greater than you being in an accident. So there's this fear. So when it comes to aviation, it is extremely well regulated. So even stuff like mechanical failures, engine failures. These things are very, very, very rare. They're very rare. They don't happen often. I think I've had one incident in my entire career, and it wasn't even it was spurious. So it was an engine failure, but the connection, the electrical connection, indicated that we had an engine failure. But even with that, one thing which people need to realize about commercial pilots, as I mentioned, we are extremely well trained. Every 6 months, we go into the simulator, and we are drilled on emergency procedures, on normal procedures, over and over and over again. In our center, to make sure that we are, it's called an OPC, an operational proficiency check. So it's to make sure that we are proficient in what we're doing. And that's why even when pilots do have mechanical failures or engine failure or any kind of emergency, 99% of the time they handle it and they execute everything successfully and safely, because we're trained to do just that.
Oh, absolutely awesome. So now, from where you stand or sit as a professional in the industry, would you say that there are window of opportunities for more investors to come in and thrive, especially in the Nigerian space?
Oh yes, of course, definitely. And I think when it comes to you mentioned investors, so there's pilot training, and then there's the aviation industry as a whole in general. So when it comes to pilot training, as mentioned, what we do at my company, Zino Aviation, we get so many different inquiries. We're helping people all across the world, in Nigeria, West Africa, Ghana, South Africa, America. And there is a humongous demand now globally for pilots. So, for example, what happened, and there's always been a pilot shortage. However, because of what happened with COVID and the global pandemic, a lot of people weren't flying. A lot of the airlines went bust. A lot of people had to do forced redundancy and let go of a lot of pilots because they didn't anticipate the aviation industry would recover as quickly as it did. And now in the world, virtually everywhere, flight levels have even superseded pre-pandemic flight levels. But now there's a problem, because what happened was there were a lot of people who took early retirement, senior captains. There were a lot of people who, when they got laid off, they maybe dusted off their degree or started a business and did other things. And so as the flight levels have now started to come back, and there's a humongous demand for pilots, a lot of people are like, well, I'm currently running my business, or I don't want to come back to aviation. And so globally right now, in fact, this morning I was watching a CNN, and they were literally talking about this exact same thing, and how there's going to be a tsunami of retirement, or rather a tsunami of senior pilots are going to be retiring over the next 15 years, and how they don't even have the pilot numbers to be able to make these things up. And so what happens is there's simply supply and demand. So they need more pilots, so they now start to raise the salaries. And now in America, some captains are even earning up to $500,000 per year, simply because they're needing these pilots. So this is a fantastic time for people who want to become commercial pilots to get involved in aviation. There's definitely opportunities that are going to be available. Even in Nigeria, a lot of senior captains, senior co-pilots, they're also leaving a lot of the airlines here in Nigeria to take some of these other opportunities abroad, such as in Asia, in Europe, and other countries that are in demand of these pilots, which means that there's now a vacuum which needs to be filled. Also, in terms of even general aviation in Nigeria, airports are being built by different governments, and where airports are being built, there's an opportunity for many different things, such as flight schools, such as air traffic control services, such as other aviation-related business. And so now, I would say it's a fantastic time for investors, whether you're becoming a pilot or wanting to invest in aviation, to get involved.
Okay, so how about with this Japa bandwagon, or this Japa syndrome? Now, for those who decided to train to become a pilot and then decided that they want to travel or go to see places or check where the grass is green on the other side. Now, if they have to travel, are there windows of opportunities for them abroad, internationally, or are there prejudices that they have to battle with?
So yes and no. So as I mentioned earlier, I like how you brought this up because it's actually a very big issue. Everybody wants to Japa. Everybody is seeking for, so to speak, greener pastures. And I don't blame anybody. But at the same time, one thing people need to realize about the industry is, like in my company, Zino Aviation, as I mentioned, we work with aspiring pilots to help them become commercial pilots. And one thing which is a very common question which we get all the time is, I don't want to come back to Nigeria. I want to get a job flying internationally. I don't want to come back. I want to work in Canada or America or Dubai or all these places. And one thing which I tell people is one thing you have to realize is basically how it usually works globally is when you finish flight school, you have about 200 hours of flight time. 200 hours, maybe 250 hours, it depends. However, a lot of all these international jobs, the flight time requirements are quite high. So you might want to get a job, for example, in an airline like Emirates, and you might see that they require 2,000 hours for a co-pilot position, an entry-level position. But you finish flight school, and you only have 200 hours. So how is that going to work? The country which is going to, you finish flight school and next thing you know, you're flying a Boeing 737 straight out of flight school or Embraer 145 is in Nigeria. Obviously, we talk to a lot of the Nigerians, which is what we're talking about predominantly. So I usually tell people the modus operandi is usually you finish your flight training, then you come back to Nigeria, you get a job flying for a local airline, and we have some fantastic local airlines here in Nigeria: Air Peace, Ibom Air, Max Air, Bristow, many fantastic airlines, and there are more that are springing up every day. Rano Air, Value Jet. Get a job flying for one of these airlines, cut your teeth, maybe for about 2 to 3 years, build your hours up until you're able to be recognized by the international community for these international jobs. And if you still want to Japa, then go ahead. But if you don't, like I said, we'll have to continue your airlines here. But that being said, at the same time, we've recruited pilots. We were contacted by one of Nigeria's airlines last year, and we were in charge of recommending pilots for them to hire. So we are involved in the pilot selection process. We are involved in the pilot recruitment process, and so we're constantly keeping up with what is happening, what the job offers internationally as well. And the other day, we saw one of the world's largest airlines, and they were taking co-pilots who only needed about, I think it was 200 hours, which is what you finish when you come from flight school. So this was something that was very unique, which we hadn't really seen a lot. And the reason that they were doing this is, once again, because of this global pilot shortage, right? So that particular airline in the past might have required 1,500 hours. Because they're now in high demand, or there's a high demand for pilots, they've reduced the threshold for employment to entry level. So these opportunities are out there, and they are also increasing. So whatever you want, it's innovation, we'll be able to help you through.
Absolutely spot on. So now I understand that just as you have different vehicles, different cars, different machines, different trucks, you also have different airlines or aircraft, and there are different techniques of riding these vehicles. So is it same for aircraft? I mean, just because a professionally trained and certified pilot can fly propeller aircraft, does that mean that he or she can also fly a jet aircraft, a rotorcraft, a Dreamlifter, MD-83 aircraft, or even a Stratolaunch Rock?
So no, and yes. So how in Germany works when you're trying to become a pilot? And this is, I love your question, because they provide this knowledge and to be able to guide people so they're able to make the right decisions for themselves. So in response to your question, how it works is you would go off the flight school, you would become a commercial pilot, and you'd conduct what is called initial training, right? So you would get your private pilot's license, your commercial pilot's license, your instrument rating, your multi-engine. These are all just ratings and qualifications that will enable you to become a commercial pilot, to be able to fly for an airline or a private jet operator. But that is only, in essence, the initial. That's why we call it initial training. After that, You can't just say, oh, I'm a commercial pilot. Today I'm going to fly Boeing 737. Tomorrow I'm going to fly Airbus A380. It doesn't really work like that because all the aircrafts are completely different. They have different performance characteristics. They have different aircraft systems, different weights and limitations, and all of these things. So you would have to engage in what's referred to as type rating training. And that is a training where you would basically undergo it in a simulator. It usually tends to vary between 1 month to 2 months. You would basically go off for this training, and you would be trained how to fly a specific type of aircraft. That's why it's called type training. It's a specific type. Whether that's a Boeing 737, and they would basically train you all about all the systems, all the limitations. You learn how to fly the aircraft in the simulator. You would learn how to handle all the emergencies, all the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, and the EOPs, the emergency operating procedures. And at the end of your training, you are now qualified to fly that specific type of aircraft. And so therefore, you can apply for jobs which would be able to which fly that particular type of aircraft. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. So, but then are people actually trained to fly all kinds of aircraft or some specifics? Just as you have for medicine, you can either be a general practitioner or a specialist.
Okay. So, very good question. When it comes to, getting a job in aviation, people usually tend to use the word commercial pilot. And the word commercial pilot, it's now been used in the sense of being an airline pilot. So the two words, pretty much now synonymous, but they don't mean the same thing. So a commercial pilot is simply a pilot that can be paid to fly. So as I mentioned earlier, when you do your initial training, the first stage is a private pilot's license. Once you get your private pilot's license, you can rent a plane by yourself, a small maybe Cessna, and fly your family, your friends, and everything. But you cannot be paid to fly because you're not a commercial pilot. That's where you get commerce, money, right? So once you finish your commercial training, you're now a commercial pilot. However, and this is answering your question, there are various needs for aviation, or for pilots. You could be a commercial pilot as an instructor, teaching people how to fly. In a flight school, you're still getting paid. You could be a commercial pilot. You're an airline pilot. You fly the airlines. You could be a commercial pilot who flies private jets. You're flying your politicians, your businessmen, your celebrities. The affluent people in society. You could be a commercial pilot. And you're a crop sprayer. Which is basically where you fly over farmlands and you release pesticides and all these kind of things. You're still getting paid to do that. So there's so different types of commercial pilot, cargo pilots, bush pilots, law enforcement. And so even when you finish your training, there's a wealth of opportunities out there which you can get into. It's not just the airline flying that's available to you.
So how about weather conditions? All of these put into put together, and when someone put into consideration when someone wants to come in for training to become a professional pilot, because we know that Nigeria's weather condition is quite peculiar from what you have in other African countries or even in the Western countries. So are all of these things put together into consideration if I want to learn how to fly?
Yeah, of course they are. One thing I tell people, because a lot of people that, and once again, this is why we founded my company, Zino Aviation, to be able to help people, guide people, give them, the right knowledge. And we get this question quite a lot. And one thing people don't realize is how you could become a commercial pilot realistically anywhere within about 8 months to 2 years, depending on where you're doing your training and a lot of other variables and factors as well. So usually one thing I tell people is how long it will take to become a commercial pilot usually depends on about 4 things. One is time. Do you have free time, to do an integrated program, or you're doing it little by little as you're working? The other one is money. If you have all the money, you're going to progress very, very quickly, right? If you're waiting for your mom or your dad, to be sending you money, as you're in your flight school, you're going to progress a lot slower. Other things are such as the flight school you go to, the country you do it in, but then the big one, or one of the big ones, is weather. So, for example, if you were to be one of the downsides, the pros and cons, all our partner flight schools, they're not in Nigeria. Our partner flight schools are abroad in different countries. But if you were to conduct your flight training in Nigeria, one of the downsides is, for example, Hamatan. So when the Hamatan season comes, which is, like you said, there's no Hamatan in America or in South Africa, but there's Hamatan in Nigeria. When the northerly breezes are bringing all the dust from the Sahara Desert. As a student pilot in flight school, you can only fly when the weather conditions are immaculate. So you've got to have good visibility. You've got to have no rain. You've got to have very, very ambient and good weather conditions. But when Hamatan comes, the visibility is very bad. It deteriorates very substantially. And so as a result, for about a month, 2 months, depends on, a Hamatan sometimes does its own thing. Sometimes it comes in November, sometimes it comes in December, sometimes it comes in February. So usually for those few months in Nigeria, a lot of pilots can't fly, student pilots. And so as a result, their flight training tends to get halted. And so these are some factors that one must always put into consideration when you're trying to select a flight school. And that's why my company, Zino Aviation, we help you with this process to be able to make the right decisions for yourself.
So if I have acrophobia, is that enough reason to give up my dream of becoming a pilot someday, or can it actually be worked on?
So here's the thing. One thing which I tell people as well is, a lot of people are afraid of flying. However, one thing I tell people is if fear is significantly induced by ignorance, right? So a lot of the reasons that people are afraid is because they don't actually know. So obviously, my company's innovation, I get a lot of parents to contact me for their children. And they're like, I don't want my child to die. And so when I break it down to them, that well, actually, statistically speaking, you're more likely, statistically speaking, to slip in your bathtub and hit your head and die than if you should die in a commercial air accident. So they're like, oh, really? Yeah. So a lot of times there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of ignorance. So even when it comes to you flying, and like you said, you might suffer from being afraid. When you're in the air, I'll give you a quick example. So many years ago, I was on a commercial flight. I wasn't flying. I was just a passenger. And there was a young lady that was beside me. And as we were about to take off, she was hyperventilating. She was shaking. She was really, really afraid. And so I just didn't say anything. I waited until we took off. When we hit the cruise and we're level, I engaged in a conversation with her. And I said, hey, it's like, you're afraid of flying, right? She's like, yeah. She gets really terrified. She hears all these noises on the plane, and she, her heart starts to beat, and she gets scared. So I told her, I introduced myself, said, hey, my name is Captain Zino. I'm a commercial pilot, and I want to help you. So I began to talk to her about some of her fears, and she immediately began to become a lot less apprehensive, right? And I told her, okay, what are you afraid of? And she would be like, okay, there's a particular noise I hear. I said, okay, you know what? That noise is actually the flaps that are extending. So we're going to start descending shortly, and I want you to have a look at the wing. And she did everything I told her. And as she heard the noise, she started to panic. I said, no, just look out the window. That's what is causing that noise. When you hear that clump, that's the landing gear coming down. And as I took my time to explain to her all the things that were making her afraid, she realized, oh, is that it? I said, yeah. And so immediately, the fear just evaporated, and she realized there was nothing to be afraid of. So there are fear flying classes that people put on, even Zino Aviation. That's one of the things that we're working on, as well, to get people in to enable them to be able to understand flight a lot better.
All right.
So they can really embrace it, reject it.
Great, absolutely spot on. Clearly, there's a lot to unbundle from this conversation, and we will continue after this timeout. Don't go anywhere. Join us again. Does reading books or listening to people who have succeeded, can it actually help you to grow in areas where you are deficient on? Because a lot of people would say that why should an African or a Nigerian read a book that is written by Westerners? Why should I read a book on leadership that is written by, say, John C. Maxwell, when the inspirations that he got is quite peculiar to my own location? A pastor once said that Western witchcraft is different from what you have right here in Africa. So like two different kettle of fish. So, and it doesn't apply to, the same thing actually applies to prayer. When you're praying, that you have to pray differently there and here. I don't even know if I believe that. So else, if you don't take all of this in cognizance, that would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I yes and no, and I'll explain where I'm going with this. I think I think rejecting knowledge is a very dangerous thing to do. Anybody who has a mindset of I will reject this knowledge because I perceive it's not applicable to me, has already made a humongous error. So in response to what you said, in terms of acquiring knowledge, one thing which I tell people all the time is, I tell this to every single person which I mentor. I ask them a question. I say, what are the two biggest universities in the world? And they usually always say Oxford or Cambridge, right? They say Oxford or Cambridge. And I say, you're wrong. The two biggest universities in the world are Google and YouTube. There's absolutely nothing that you want to learn right now in the entire world that you cannot learn online for free. There's a plethora of people that will teach you for free. So you've got to be able to dedicate yourself to going to acquire knowledge. You mentioned stuff like even mentorship. I always tell everybody as well. I say, like we say in Nigeria, right? Shine your eye, follow who know road, right? So if somebody's already gone ahead of you, they've already made mistakes, right? Why would you decide to think I know what is best? I will do things by myself. I think that is like the height of fundamental foolishness, right? Go and learn from those who've gone before you, those who are or those who you admire, those who are in a place that you want to be there, and try and get access from those people. They know things that you will never know.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've actually missed out on a whole lot, but then you can still join in the conversation. As our guest on the show today is Captain Zino Mario-Ghae. He is a British-Nigerian commercial pilot. All right, before we went on that break, we've actually spoken quite a lot of things. But now, let's divert a little bit and talk about all the things that you're also into, aside flying an airplane. I know that you're into mentoring of would-be pilots. Now, personal development is what we'll talk about. Why is it important? Why is it so important for an individual to personally develop him or herself?
I think I think when it comes to personal development, it's essential. And as you put it, I mentor a lot of people, not just in terms of aviation, also a lot of business mentoring. I'm also a life coach as well. And one thing which I tell everybody which I mentor is, you are limited by your skill set. So your progress, you can only progress to the degree that you're able to develop your skills, because it's only by developing your skills that you're going to be valuable to people. If you have no skill sets, then you're just not valuable to anybody. So I constantly tell people you need to invest in yourself. A lot of times there's this thing of, a young man contacted me the other day. It was like, what should I invest in? Should I invest in this? Should I invest in cryptocurrency? Should I invest in real estate? I said the number one thing which you need to invest in young man, is yourself. You need to invest in yourself to grow your skill set, to grow your knowledge, because the more skillful you are, the more valuable you are to people. And the more value you bring to the marketplace, the more value you bring to a conversation, the more valuable it is for them, the more valuable it can also be for you, and the more you can also achieve. So anyone who possesses an inability or a laziness to develop their skill sets, whether it's your business skill set, your interpersonal skill set, whether it's technical skills or non-technical skills, they're really, really, really going to have a difficult time in life, because these are things that we need to be doing. So it's very important.
I hear you say you need to develop on some personal skill set. Now, some people think that personal development only resonates with career people, but then there are loads of skills that we did not pick or learn from our parents or when we're in school. We just pick them up naturally as we advance in life. So what are the areas or the skill set that an individual needs to develop on?
Very, very interesting question. I think that everybody's different, and everybody is doing different things in life. So where one individual might be going, somebody else might be going a completely different direction. So certain skills that one person might need, another person might not necessarily need those skills as much. So what I tend to teach people is, I think there are just one or two things which are just foundational that I believe personally everybody should have access or should be able to master these skills. One are interpersonal skills, right? So your ability to communicate with other people, your ability to understand, to be empathetic to people. These are skills that need to be worked on, right? Your ability to build rapport. Because it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to encounter people. So you need to be able to have people skills. It's essential. I also think as the world is changing and becoming a lot more advanced, I think you don't necessarily need to be an expert, but you need to work on your digital skills. You need to have IT skills. The IT guys right now they're doing very, very well for themselves. And I think especially if you're going to go into business, it's really, really important because as opposed to outsourcing a lot of things, which is going to obviously impact your business financially, if you're able to, especially at startup level, you're able to, I don't know, maybe do a little bit of website design, a little bit of graphics design, a little bit of all these things. It doesn't matter what industry that you're in or what industry your business is in, it's going to really, enable you to get a lot of stuff done for free in essence. I also believe that, as I mentioned, it just depends where you're going, right? I believe that business skills are foundational. A lot of people, they go to school, and they finish secondary school, and you finish secondary school, but ultimately, congratulations, you know how to calculate, mathematics, and you know how to to speak English, right? But you know nothing about business because it wasn't foundationally taught you in your school. So now you're in the big boy world or the big girl world, you're in real life trying to navigate things, but nobody's equipped you. Nobody's taught you about running a business. Nobody's taught you about marketing. Nobody's taught you about finance. Nobody's taught you about how to build a business, how to file your taxes. So now you're having to try to figure things out step by step. And I truly believe from a young age, these are some fundamental skills that even when it comes to the educational sector should be really hammered to everybody. Because like I said, congratulations, you know math, you know science, you know physics, but do you know business, right? And so for me, I do a lot of business mentorship. I mentor quite a lot of young people, and I just tell them all the time, skills, skills, skills. Get knowledge, get skills, be effective, and you will have success in whatever your endeavors are.
I like the fact that you said you know maths, you know English, you know physics. Do you know business? I like that one. All right, so now does reading books or listening to people who have succeeded, can it actually help you to grow in areas where you are deficient on? Because a lot of people would say that why should an African or a Nigerian read a book that is written by Westerners? Why should I read a book on leadership that is written by, say, John C. Maxwell, when the inspirations that he got is quite peculiar to my own location? A pastor once said that Western witchcraft is different from what you have right here in Africa. So it's like two different kettle of fish. So, and it doesn't apply to, the same thing actually applies to prayer. When you're praying, that you have to pray differently there and here. I don't even know if I believe that. So else, if you don't take all of this in cognizance, that would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I yes and no, and I'll explain where I'm going with this. I think I think rejecting knowledge is a very dangerous thing to do. Anybody who has a mindset of I will reject this knowledge because I perceive it's not applicable to me, has already made a humongous error. Because how do you know if it's really applicable to you if you haven't even decided to invest in listening to what that piece of knowledge has to offer you? So I don't believe in rejecting knowledge from everybody. I think culturally there's some mindsets that we need to renew our minds when it comes to a lot of things. So in response to what you said, in terms of like acquiring knowledge, one thing which I tell people all the time is, I tell this to every single person which I mentor. I ask them a question. I say, what are the two biggest universities in the world? And they usually always say Oxford or Cambridge. Right? They say Oxford or Cambridge. And I say, you're wrong. The two biggest universities in the world are Google and YouTube. There's absolutely nothing that you want to learn right now in the entire world that you cannot learn online for free. There's a plethora of people that will teach you for free. So you've got to be able to dedicate yourself to going to acquire knowledge. You mentioned stuff like, even mentorship. I always tell everybody, is what I say, like we say in Nigeria, right? Shine your eye, follow who know road, right? So if someone
Interesting.
somebody's already gone ahead of you, they've
Mm-hmm.
already made mistakes, right? Why would you decide to think, I know what is best, I will do things by myself? I think that is like the height of fundamental foolishness, right? Go and learn from those who've gone before you, those who are where, or those who you admire, those who are in a place that you want to be there, and try and get access from those people. They know things that you will never know. They've been in situations that you need not go to, right? So all you've got to do is go to them, give them a listening ear. Now, I understand what you're saying in terms of what is, if it's in the West, and then, it's not applicable here. But here's the downside with that way of thinking. We live in a developing continent. So, Nigeria is a developing country. Africa is a developing continent. And when we say it's developing, it simply means that it's developing. So we're looking for people to come and develop it. And so if you're looking at, for example, the West or some certain countries in the West, and you're thinking, oh, well, that's not really applicable here. The question is, why is it not applicable here? Because once upon a time, the West was also developing. So
Sure.
there's a lot that we need to learn, because maybe they've been able to implement some things. And one thing which I tell everybody, which I mentor from a business standpoint as well, is all you really have to do a lot of times is look at the West, or look at, in other places that are more developed, so not just the West, right? And say, okay, what are they doing there that they're not doing here, right? Why don't I come, providing that it's culturally, applicable, because some things aren't, right? All I've got to do is just, in essence, take a screenshot and come here and do it. So once again, going back to the whole knowledge and the mentorship thing, if we decide we're going to reject what they're saying, or reject someone that's already been through all these things just because they're in a slightly different culture, I think we're going to really miss out on some really valuable gems that they have to offer.
All right, now so let's talk about mentorship. I'm going to ask you two questions, and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath. Now, kindly talk us on the need for quality mentorship and how one can receive the right kind of mentoring that they need. And secondly, can someone who has failed previously in business, in politics, in career, or in any sphere of life, but bounce back, be recommended as a mentor? Because in Nigeria, most people will remind you his or her flaws, and then they'll always want to and look at their success instead of looking at their success afterwards, or their efforts. So in that two sphere, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so just so I didn't forget, so we're talking about quality mentorship, and we're talking about
Quality mentorship, and how you can actually get the right mentoring. Can you get the right mentoring from someone who has failed in business or in any sphere, but bounce back?
So quality, here's the reality, right? We've been to the moon and back, right? As human beings, we've left the planet and we physically landed on the moon. Before we were able to land on the moon, there were crashes. There were space shuttles in all their testing that they crashed, they exploded. So if we're going to discard somebody or discard something because it didn't work out well, then that is foolishness, because those people we need to be listening to. In life, nobody just becomes great overnight. Nobody just becomes successful overnight. One thing I tell people is, for example, I founded Zino Aviation, and what we're doing is so, we don't have a lot of time, to tell you about all our services and all the things we do. You can check out our website if you have time, www.zinoaviation.com. But in doing this, even with my personal flight training, like I'm at a place now that I am impacting thousands of people across the world, in Nigeria, in Africa, in America. So many people are coming to learn from me. But when I was trying to become a commercial pilot, I failed. Yeah, when I was private pilot's license, right, I failed twice. I passed on my third attempt. There's one particular exam, NAV, was extremely challenging for me. I failed that 4 times. But I am now in a place that I am enjoying the rewards of my perseverance. Because one thing I tell in life, if you only lose when you give up. I'd rather go and learn from somebody, right, who knows how to experience or rather who knows how to overcome difficulty. Because as I'm starting my business or I'm starting whatever, the likelihood for the vast majority of people is you are going to experience difficulty. You're going to experience failure. You're going to experience setbacks. So wouldn't it make more sense for me to learn from somebody who can explain to me, oh, these are the difficulties you're facing, and this is how to get out of that situation? But if I'm choosing to only surround myself with people who have had a silver spoon or who have never failed, and by the way, those people don't exist. That's like it's a concept which we've made up. Everybody has failed. Everybody's failed. If you're in a business, maybe you did marketing at one point and that failed, and you've learned from it. Maybe your target market was the wrong target market and it failed. You've learned from it. So you might not necessarily have failed like in life, because I don't believe people fail in life. I believe that you go through seasons to be able to get you to where you need to be. And so a lot of those failures are actually stepping stones for success. And so I definitely believe that you shouldn't discard people. Now, in regards to what you said about getting quality mentorship, anybody can be a mentor. That doesn't mean they're a good mentor. A good mentor is somebody who is able to encompass various things. They are patient. Because at the end of the day, if I'm trying to learn from somebody and the person is always dismissing me, how quality is that learning experience going to be? So it's somebody that not has knowledge, not only is in a place that I aspire to be, it's someone that can provide their experience, they can provide their network, they can provide their time, their patience, and all of these things cumulatively, I believe, is what makes up a quality mentor. And I think that if you're able to find one, in whatever industry, because I know people here watching, it's not just about aviation, it's about all kinds of industries. If you're able to identify a person like that, you really should cling onto them very, very tightly and benefit from what they have to offer you.
Absolutely.
What you can also offer in return.
I hear you say resources, I hear you say time and network. Great. Now let's talk about time management. Discipline is, or time management is like discipline is a challenge that a lot of people encounter. Being too busy to exhale or even explore all that benefit that life and nature has got to offer. That to you or your loved ones. I'm sure a lot of people are currently on this table, even yours truly. So what advice, or what are your advice to people on this table at the moment on the need to master yourself and manage your time?
Okay. So one thing which I believe about time management is, in order to be able to master your time, you have to understand time. And when it comes to time management, I tell people time is the most valuable resource in the entire world. There's nothing more valuable than time. If I lose money, I can always make more money back, right? But when it comes to time, once time is gone, it's gone. If you were 20 and the next day you're 30, you will never be 20 again. That time is gone. It's passed you by. Doesn't matter how much you cry, or you can never ever get it back. And so I believe that before we can even start to talk about time management, we have to understand, why is time really, really important? If we're able to grasp that on an internal level and understand that, then we now realize, okay, it is very significant that I can now manage my time. So let me start to practically, whether you're taking time management classes or all these kind of stuff, I believe that you need to look at yourself, look at your skills, look at your talents, look at your life, look at what you want to be in life. And then you now need to figure out, okay, how do I effectively allocate my time to get there, right? Because in a day, there are only 24 hours in a day. In a year, there are only 365 days a year. So you now need to get to the point, or whoever is listening to this, where you're able to highlight what are my priorities and how much time do I need to invest in these particular things in order to achieve the outcome that I want to achieve. And once you're able to do that, you simply start to plan it. Like for example, me, I get up every single day at about 4:50, right? I'm up at 4:50, and a lot of people, they're like, why are you up so early? It's because there's so many things that I have to do, right? I wake up early and I go to sleep quite late. Don't get me wrong. The sleep is really important, right? But as time has gone on, I'm able to understand that, whoa, as you mentioned, I'm a man of many talents, and I have many businesses. I've also got a family, got to invest in my family life, right? And all these things. So I need to be able to maximize my day, and in order to do that, I have to plan my day so I can really gain the greatest output possible.
But then the school of mastering yourself is like the hardest one to pass because a lot of people want to develop themselves, yeah, but the perfect, that's perfectly, but then they're not open to creative criticism. Just as Eric Thomas once said, everyone wants to shine bright like a diamond, but no one wants to get caught. So no one wants to be told that they are, hey, you're slacking here or you're slacking there and all of that. And then, or no one wants to even be told that your tie looks really awful. So how do you deal with such?
I think that, well, several things. I think as somebody who, I love criticism. I believe that criticism is one of the best things that can happen to an individual because your critic will highlight all of your flaws. Your critic will let you know where you're messing up. And if I'm able to understand or know where I'm messing up, then I can start to develop on those things. The problem that a lot of people have is they have their walls up. And I have compassion for those people, by the way, because a lot of times maybe you're insecure, maybe, your childhood, you always criticize, and so you don't like taking criticism, or it could be for a wide variety of reasons that people reject criticisms. Now, what I know is you shouldn't reject criticism. Criticism, if handled properly, will make you the very best version of yourself. And that's why I say I love. A quick example. I remember years ago, I was flying with a particular captain, and when I was co-pilot, he didn't like me too much, right? And so he would look for opportunities to criticize my flying. And I remember one time he was like, this isn't how you do it, boy. This is how you do it. And he was showing me, and as opposed to reject him, saying this person is trying to put me down, or this person is trying to whatever, I decided to sit back and listen to him and watch him attentively as he demonstrated to me the perfect technique to execute and everything. Now, his intention was to bring me down. But what he actually did, because of how I responded to the criticism, is I actually started to go further up. And I then mastered what he was teaching me. And if I do say so myself, I became extremely good at it, right? So much so other people even began to praise that very thing. But if I had rejected that criticism, I would have rejected the opportunity to grow and develop myself. And so once again, as mentioned, I completely empathize with people. Maybe it's because of insecurity, or maybe you're just proud. Whatever it is, that wall needs to come back. And we need to learn as human beings to be able to embrace constructive criticism. And that's everything which I teach all the people which I mentor.
All right, just because our time is fast spent. Now, beyond books, direct or indirect coaching and mentorship, what other ways can an individual develop him or herself and develop their soft skills?
The internet. So beyond books, the internet. As I mentioned earlier, the two biggest universities are Google and YouTube. There's nothing you want to learn. If you want to become good at public speaking, there are millions of people that will teach you online for free. If you want to become, good at your interpersonal skills, there are people who teach you for free. Business skills, they'll teach you for free. All we now have to do is discipline ourselves to be able to locate such resources to be able to develop these skills. And once again, like you mentioned in terms of mentorship, maybe you need to get access to a particular community, whether it's an online community or maybe there's a community that is, in your industry that you meet up regularly. Try to get access to those circles and try to associate yourself with the right people, and you never know what might come your way. But the knowledge is that there's a vast ubiquity of knowledge out there. We're in 2023. You've just got to be able to discipline yourself to access that knowledge and watch your life skyrocket if you're disciplined.
Thank you so much. I've picked a lot of lovely things from this conversation, and that's a very fine way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Captain Zino. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
That's been fantastic being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise. All right, viewers, that's where we end this conversation. We have been chatting with Captain Zino Mario-Ghae. He is a British-Nigerian commercial pilot, and it's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. I'm sure you must have been rightly educated, entertained, and informed. I will see you again next time. Keep watching The Conversation because you never know who my next guest will be and what I will be speaking about next. Until I come your way again, from the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless you and yours, and God bless Nigeria.